Hello chess fans, I know a lot of beginners have troubles with the fried liver as black, and today I'm going to give you two responses. One slightly dubious but very tricky, and one as a main line that is used by GMs to this day to defeat the fried liver. So I'm going to start off with the dubious one. So the dubious one, obviously after knight f6 we have the fried liver. A lot of players recommend that you play bishop c5, but I don't believe that this is the best way to play because here we have to learn even more. For example, we have to learn against the Evans gambit, we have to learn against c3 d4, the center game, we have to learn against knight c3, and we no longer have the center fork trick, and we have to learn against like some moves like a3 b4 ideas, and so there's too much to learn I think in bishop c5, which makes it a much more complicated move. So I recommend knight f6, and especially for beginners, lots of beginners will play knight c3 here, and here you can have the center fork trick. So instead, the most common move among most players is knight g5. So here, what you have to do is not go for bishop c5, because against bishop c5, the tracks are counter gambit. They have bishop takes e7 after king e7. I really don't see that black has any compensation after the bishop retreats to any of these squares. It just feels like a very easy game for white, and white is scoring huge in the database here with over a 50% win rate, when par is supposed to be 25, 50% draw, and 25 for black. Alright, so here let's play d5. And after e takes d5, here I'm going to recommend the slightly dubious but very tricky move, d5. The Fritz variation of the fried liver. And now here, most fried liver players are like, okay, I really want to get my knight here. So how do I get that because my bishop is blocked? Oh, I know, play d6. And now here, as we can see, white has attacked the pawn on f7 again. And seemingly here, white is winning because black doesn't really have a good way to defend the pawn. Other than like you losing another pawn. For example, if we play knight f6, they can take another pawn, and here black would clearly be losing. But after d6, we're going to play the stunning move, queen takes d6. And this will shock a lot of players. A lot of players will be absolutely shocked. Now, when I've played this, the most common move I've seen is knight takes f7. And here we have the absolutely stunning move, queen c6, and there's simply no way for white to defend all the threats. There's a threat on the bishop, there's a threat on the pawn, and there's also the fact that the knight is hanging. And so now here, what happens in most of the games here in the Legis database is your opponent will take on h8. And here, simple winning move, queen takes g2, threatening the rook f1, and here see if you can find the winning move. It's not very hard. Bishop g4, and the queen is actually just trapped here. For example, if white plays f3, after bishop takes f3, rook takes f3, king takes e3, queen takes, here we see black is just up, not just a queen, but also about to mate their opponent. So here this would be an excellent position for black. So next, they don't have to take with the knight. They can also take here with the bishop, which is considered to be the best move. Now here, we want to basically punish white for keeping their pieces so attached to each other. So we're going to play the weird move king e7. Reason we play this is because we're threatening h6, and after the knight move back, we take the bishop. So here, what white pretty much has to do is go back with their bishop. And if they go back to bishop c4, again, we have the same tactic with queen c6. So they can't do that. So they should go bishop b3. And here, very simple, knight takes b3, a takes b3, and we're just going to get a ton of tempos on this loose knight. So first we go h6, they're going to go knight f3, we go e4, constantly attacking the knight, and here a famous game, or not a famous game, a game between grandmasters went queen e2, king f7, and knight g1, and here black was already significantly better after bishop g4. Notice that black has all their pieces developed, with the rook ready to come to the game, the queen's about to slide over, with the bishop coming into the game, the king, like this rook also coming into the game, and here black is actually better according to the engine, even though they're just down a pawn. And now don't be afraid of being down a pawn, because if the engine says you're better, you obviously have a lot of compensation. It's not like your opponent is just going to be able to trade all the pieces easily. So now, after knight d4, we've discussed why d6 is not a very good move. Now the best move and the only move for advantage is c3 for white. So this is already very tricky. And here, if your opponent already wasn't surprised enough after we played knight d4, we're going to shock them again. And we're going to play the ridiculous looking move, b5. And now, when you see this for the first time, the most obvious thing is, oh, don't I just win a pawn here? So after c takes d4, which is a very common move, you can just take b takes d4, and after d takes d5, knight takes d5. You might think, wait, why is white not better here? Doesn't black have these horrible doubled pawns? White has more control of the center. Well, the reason why black is equal here is because black is completely equal in development. Not to mention we have knight b4 and knight d3 ideas. So now here, what you can do is, white doesn't really have a lot of good moves here because their knight is hanging. If they go with their knight back, we can go for bishop f5, and it's really impossible for them to cover these light squares. And so now, instead of that, they can go d4 to defend their knight with their bishop, but here we have the very nice move, bishop b4. And notice that if they block with the queen, we can take the knight because it's pinned. So this is how a lot of games went, and here white has to play the move king f1 or king e2, which are both very sad moves to play. So now they don't actually have to go for c takes here. That's not even the main move. That's not a very good move. They can also go for this move bishop d3, which looks a lot more natural because you're simply not undeveloping the bishop, because we don't really want to undevelop the bishop. But here we can play simple move bishop f5. If they take, we take here, and they can never castle. And after knight takes here, there's no way for them to defend the pawn. Their pieces are both stuck behind the c3 pawn, and here black would be significantly better. So if we can get significantly better over the opening, we should be very happy with the opening. So now the main move after b5 is the absolutely shocking bishop f1. Comes out of nowhere, going back to the starting square. Not a lot of opponents are going to play this if this is the first time they've seen it. And the reason why is because after queen takes here, we would be attacking the g2 pawn. So they have to defend it. So we play knight takes here, attacking the knight. And here most people are going to take the knight. Notice that they can also do other stuff. For example, they can play knight e4, but then after knight e6, we're threatening f5. And just to give a sample line, something like might look like this. We're threatening f5, bishop c5. Here, white is considered to be about equal, but I think I prefer black here because black has a lot of easy attacking ideas, especially with the knight coming to f4 and the fact that we're going to kick this knight away. All right, so after bishop d1 takes here, the main move is to take here. And here we're going to take here. So basically keeping the bishop locked here. And only now, your opponent has to know all of this up to move 10. And then they have to know that they can finally take the pawn. And here we have to go king d8 because, okay, we don't want to trade pieces. After castles, we're going to go bishop b7. And here we have another threat. If your opponent was nonchalantly playing knight c3, we can go knight e3 and win the queen. Or we can go knight f4, and we have mate here actually after something like g3 and knight h3. Very nice mate. So after this, your opponent has to play, again, another very accurate move, queen f3, walking into the line of fire, but here, apparently, white is doing well. And here you have two options. You can either win back the pawn, and after this, the position is not that great for black, but you're not down a pawn at least. Or you can go for the more solid rook b8, and after it takes knight e3, queen h3, and this position, black is considered to be slightly worse here because of the fact that they're down a pawn, but this position has not that bad win rates for black, surprisingly, considering that black has a lot of basically counterplay with c5 coming and nice active pieces, and knight can come here and crush you with knight f3 in the future, and this position is all but clear. So now I hope you like review this sort of video, and maybe I'll leave a link to the description of the study I'm using. So the next move I want to talk to you about is this move after d takes e4. It's to play knight a5. And knight a5 is by far the main line and probably the best move in this position. And if you don't want to play tricky, if you don't want to be possibly losing, if your opponent knows everything, knight a5 is definitely the way to go. So after bishop b5, we're going to play c6. After takes. Here, white has three distinct options. So I can't obviously describe all the lines in detail because there's a ton of lines here for white and black, which is why I don't think the fried liver is particularly good for white or black for beginners and is more of an advanced weapon. And even at that, I don't think the fried liver gives an advantage, so maybe not. So here, one of the trickiest moves they can play is queen f3. And here for a long time, a lot of players were playing rook b8 because after takes, they have this fort. Now, what I say to playing rook b8 is we don't care about the pawn. We're going to play bishop e7, and after bishop takes c6, knight takes c6, queen takes d6, bishop d7. Believe it or not, black is significantly better here. And this is exactly the type of position I love playing because of the fact that the win rates here, massive for black. Black is holding around a 50% win rate, which should happen in no opening. And it's because of the fact black is better here, according to the engine too, because they're way up on development, and white's two pawns don't mean anything if they're going to get checkmated. Here we're going to start kicking around the knight with moves like h6, knight here, and e4, kick around the queen with rook c8, castle our king, generally bring our bishop sometimes to b5, this bishop to c5, this bishop sometimes comes to d6, the queen comes out to a5, and sometimes h5. Here the position is winning for black. So instead of that, the best move is to go bishop d3. And here, after something like h6, knight e4, knight d5, we see that black here is doing reasonably well. After they have threats of f5 and e4, we can castle. And here we're up in development again, and their pieces are not going to get out easily. So now queen f3 is just a tricky move. It's not the main move. One of the main lines is to go bishop e2. And here what you have to do is kick away the knight. So the knight has two options here. Then go knight h3. And here there's a lot of moves that are really complicated. The simplest move I think for black is just to take. And here black is equal because of the fact that white has these horrible pawns and is down on development. Granted, you did give up the bishop pair, but because their king is weak, I don't think we need the bishop pair that much here. And if you want, you can also play bishop c5 or bishop d6, and these are both also moves that guarantee white-black equality. After h6, the main move for them is to go knight f3. And here we're going to go e4, attacking the knight. And after e5, there's a subtle nuance that we're going to play this move bishop c5. And the reason why is if we play bishop d6, which is the main line, attacking the knight, they can play d4, and after takes, this position is considered to be very slightly better for white. According to the engines, it's equal. But white is not doing that badly in the database here with a 30% win rate, which is 5% above basically what is average. So instead of doing that, what we should do is play this move bishop c5, discouraging d5. Notice they can't play d4, else would take it. So here they play c3 to play d4, and here we show them our massive, amazing trick, which is now bishop d6. Boom! Going back with the bishop is extremely deadly here, because after d4, e takes d6, you might say, what? Isn't this just the same exact position with c3? c3 makes a huge difference because they can't play bishop b3 and bishop b3. Sorry, b3 and bishop b2, and they can't play knight c3, both of which are their main ideas. One of their main ideas is to go bishop b3 and knight and bishop here, and then try to follow that up with knight here blockading the square, but this is no longer possible as the c3 pawn is blocking all their plans. So against this b2, remember, or against knight f3, remember this important bishop c5 move if you want to play this. Finally, let's look at bishop d3, which is touted as basically what the grandmasters play these days at this level. I know a lot of people make the mistake of playing h6 here. Unfortunately, h6 doesn't work because after knight f3, the bishop is actually covering the square. So after something like another move, it would not be possible to do this usually because the knight usually would have to go back here. But after knight coming to e4, the position is very advantageous for white. So instead of that, we have to go knight d5. And here white has two moves. So we're attacking the knight and we're also threatening knight f4. So either they can go back to f3 or they can play h4 defending their knight. And against h4, we can go for the simple bishop c5, something like queen f3. Notice that if they castle, they're actually immediately losing after h6. And the normal problem with h6 is that, oh, they have queen h5 and there's this pin. But because we played bishop c5 first, we have castles defending, attacking the knight, and here black is completely winning after mutual threats of knight f4 and moves like queen takes h4 right after. Notice that, okay, the knight moves away, we can even think about trapping the queen. Alright, so instead of that, after here, they can probably usually go for queen f3, and this is just a sample line, f5, threatening e4, and if bishop takes f5, castles is considered to be winning for the black pieces. Alright, so the main move is to go knight f6. Here we're going to go bishop d6, defending our pawn, and after castles, here we're again going to play the main move, which I feel is the simplest, knight f4, just looking to take that bishop. If the bishop goes anywhere else, we can play this very stunning move, knight takes g2, and if king takes g2, e4, they're losing the piece back, because if they move the piece, queen g5 is leading to mate. For example here, queen f4, there's no way to defend mate. Alright, so they can't defend the bishop, so what they have to do, the main line, is to go rook e1, and after takes. Position is completely equal. For example, they even have this move after castles, knight takes e5, c5. Black is actually slightly better here, even though they're down 2 pawns because of how much it's going to hurt white to develop this bishop and how monstrous our double bishops are. So that's the end of today's video, guys. I hope you learned something from one of these two setups to deal with the fried liver attack. I tried to make it as easy and quick as possible for anyone from the beginner level to the master level so that they can use this repertoire to destroy the fried liver once and for all. If you like this video and you want to see more from me, please remember to leave a like and subscribe, and be sure to leave any video recommendations down in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.